Today I'd like to talk about how to invest in property in 2020 and in particular give you some really actionable content that I know will help you build your property business this year. Hi, my name is Tony Law from Your First Four Houses, and my channel is all about helping you achieve financial freedom through property. If this is your first time here, be sure to subscribe to the channel and click that bell notification icon so that you don't miss out on any of the free content that I give you each and every week. Before we dive in, I'm not FCA approved. These are just going to be my personal opinions, if that's okay. Please, please, please do your own full and complete due diligence. So I want to approach this in two different parts. Firstly, I want to talk about what factors are influencing the property market in 2020. And secondly, how you can use this to gain a huge advantage over the competition, over other property investors. And by the way, if you want to wait until the very end of the video, I've got something to share that I think you might find really, really helpful. So what's influencing the property market in 2020? Well, obviously the big Conservative win at the back end of 2019 obviously has a massive impact on the property world, doesn't it? I'm not a political beast by any means, but I think surely all property investors would agree that a Corbyn win would have had a massively detrimental effect, even more so than what's been happening over the past couple of years on the property market. I believe there's now some certainty. In a good way. There's less negativity that's out there. Is a property crash going to be happening in 2020? Personally, I don't think it will. I personally think it's less likely now. There might be a softening of prices. Again, you've got to take your own view on this, but I personally don't think there will be. Projects that were on hold in the run-up to the election, you know, as soon as we got the Conservative government back in again, those projects largely moved forwards again. Rent control, the right to buy now seems to have kind of gone away, at least for now. So I'm kind of giving this whole market a bit of a tentative thumbs up. Boring Brexit, it's definitely happening. So what? I hear you cry. Well, the only reason I mention it now is, will some foreign workers feel like they are going to be going back to their own country? I think there's a strong chance that that will have a negative effect on the demand for HMO rooms. What about interest rates? Well, again, you've got to do your own due diligence here, obviously, but I think they're going to be remaining low in the short to medium term. Again, no guarantees. You need to seek your own advice. What I will say to you is what I've just done is I've gone through this whole process of refinancing, and I have absolutely nailed down the properties that I've got that have got mortgages on, and some of my properties don't have mortgages, but I've nailed down the lowest possible rate on a sensible loan to value. So can I maybe suggest you go and speak to your independent mortgage broker, somebody with the access to the whole of the market, and you maybe consider doing the same. Legislation, obviously there was loads of new legislation in 2019, as most of us are aware, and there's going to be more in 2020. I guess the big one that we're talking about is Section 21 being scrapped. Obviously that's being viewed very negatively. I've got to do a video on that actually. Is serviced accommodation legislation around the corner? It might be, possibly. I think one of the best things you can do is to educate yourself in this area. The National Landlord Association, the NLA, do some really, really good courses that cover legislation. They're also really cheap. You may or may not be aware the NLA and the RLA are due to merge. And I think that will actually result in even better quality courses that they're going to be putting out. So maybe check that out. Tax changes are biting. This is obviously the second time that landlords are being bitten by Section 24. Obviously, we're all aware of the 3% stamp duty on second properties. I feel personally with the 3% thing, I personally think that many property investors are now just simply factoring it into all of their costs, and it's become a kind of norm now. Nobody likes it. I certainly don't, but I kind of think it's just sort of accepted and it's being factored in naturally. Some landlords are definitely retiring early though, partly due to tax and partly due to legislation. And as landlords exit the market, and of course there's a continued increasing demand, I think a combination of those two things are going to mean that rents can remain high, generally speaking. Talking about supply and demand, certainly there's now, I don't think any question, that in some areas there is an oversupply of HMO rooms. Not in all areas, there's certainly still scope in lots and lots of areas, but I think you've got to do some real research on this. Councils are desperate, talking about supply and demand, councils are desperate for housing. They're desperate for landlords to give them their houses, and as a result of that, they are often offering some really big incentives. You might want to check that out if you're a landlord, or maybe a single let. Perhaps it's a little bit out of your area. Maybe have a chat to the councillor in that area and find out what they're doing in terms of incentives and guarantees that they can give you over the property. Don't forget, we're still a growing population despite Brexit, and we're still definitely not building enough properties. And the last thing on this part of the video is I wanted to say what is happening to our high street. Obviously, we're fully aware retail continues to die, which is such a tragedy, but ultimately that is something we're going to come on to in a moment. By the way, if you're finding this video in any way helpful, it would be absolutely awesome if you could just click that like button down there. It really helps me, if that's okay. So how can you use the information that I've just given you to gain any kind of an advantage in 2020? Well, the first thing I want to say to you is that you must start connecting with landlords now. If you're watching this in the early part of 2020, i.e. maybe this video just come out, start connecting with landlords now, or at least soon after they've got that tax bill coming, because so many landlords are being hit with this second tax bill, and they're now looking around them and they're thinking, why am I doing this? Why am I still in this property world? And then suddenly you get in contact with them, you connect with them, and you offer them some solutions, maybe some creative solutions that really solve their problems. So start connecting with landlords now. Focus on areas of demand, I think, is really important, as I mentioned earlier, especially when it comes to HMOs. So you want to be looking for the places where there is a really great demand, as I say, especially if it's HMOs. And be wary of HMOs that are reliant on foreign workers, in my opinion. Again, I don't want to name any specific areas, but I'm very aware of some areas where the tenant kind of culture in those HMOs is generally going to be foreign workers. And I think that if we are going to see a decline in the number of people renting, those places are going to get hit. Could you maybe repurpose some of those properties, maybe into service accommodation, maybe into studios, this kind of thing. But again, I've got another video coming out on that later on. Another thing I wanted to share with you was look for unsold auction lots. There are going to be a number of properties that go to auction that don't actually sell. I think that is an absolutely amazing opportunity for you to get a fantastic deal. Ultimately, you're still going to be looking for ways to add real value. Just because it hasn't sold at auction doesn't mean you're naturally going to pick up a bargain here. But you've got to think about the mindset for those people who have put that property into auction. That was literally their last opportunity, I would suggest, to get that place gone, and it doesn't sell at auction. What's their mindset going to be like? So you should, I think, be looking out for properties that don't actually sell at auction. And by the way, you should be going to auctions anyway, especially throughout 2020, because I think there's going to be some fantastic opportunities there, and I'm certainly going to be doing a lot more of that. I mentioned the high street earlier on, but can I just say to you, can I suggest you start looking for shops that are empty in secondary shopping areas. Now, if you look at lots of, not in necessarily the main high street, but if you look in secondary areas, you'll often find shops that were originally houses. Well, per square footage, these can often be considerably less than a residential home, than a C3 residential property. So can you maybe take on some of these and convert them, not necessarily just back into a single let, but maybe you can take one of these and convert it into, for example, an HMO, if in the area that you're looking at there's a big enough demand. Always focus on adding real value. I talk about adding real value a lot. So I'm not talking about a lick of paint and maybe a new kitchen. I'm talking about you should be looking for places where you can add real tangible value. Value that's way in excess of what it actually costs you to add that value in the first place. Can I also suggest that you should be using the slump in values that we're seeing at the moment, and this sort of softening demand for bigger properties, bigger houses I mean, to maybe buy your own home, possibly with a really big garden where you can then go for planning. I've done this and made some really good money out of it. I kind of upped my game, bought a big place, stretched myself a little bit, but I got a big garden, was able to build a house in the garden, I've done projects like this before, and it's a great way for you to kind of, I can't really talk about the tax implications associated with this, but if you're buying it and living it in it yourself, you might want to have a little chat to an accountant about the tax implications of doing this. Speaking of tax, become tax efficient. If you want to email me, I will give you with pleasure the details of my accountant. I think he's very good, but you should become very tax efficient in this market. I think it's essential moving forwards as we move into 2020. Above all, you've got to start taking loads of action. I think this is going to be a year that you will look back on. If you don't take enough action, I think this could be a year that you'll look back on in future years and think, why didn't I take so much more action in 2020? I know I feel like that when I look back at 2008 kind of thing. I know, or 2008, 2009, I know I should have been taking more action then. I think you might look back at this year in years to come and think, I should have taken so much more action. If you educate yourself now, this could be an incredible time for you to find some absolutely outstanding deals. And with this in mind, can I introduce you to my brand new property investing mini course? This is a completely free course. If you haven't already done this course, you want to check it out. It's going to make a massive difference to you, and it will teach you the fundamentals of how Liana and I was able to actually replace our job-based income within 18 months with just a small handful of properties. Check it out. It will really help you, because the truth is that the fundamentals still stand in property investing. You need to look for areas of growth. You need to ideally buy below market value, and I've done a lot of this, and you need to add substantial value. If you do this, honestly, you could find that 2020 could be an absolutely outstanding year for you. I know you're going to love my completely free property investing mini course. If you click on the link here on the description box below, you can get yourself enrolled, and I'll send lesson 1 straight out to you.